a lot, and you know, it was an extended time in conditions that are as cold as I'm going to get probably, so that's good. There was some of the clothing needed. I've kind of made notes about everything, so I know remember in the moment which things work and which things don't, and little changes, and which zip closures don't close properly or are hard to close in the cold. That's little things like that. It's quite important to make sure, because if I try to do that in a few weeks' time, I'm going to forget certain details. So yeah, certainly one part, no one's ever cycled out to Shingle Point before ever, so there's a little bit of originality in it as well. Yeah, I made that up last night. That kind of shows pretty clearly where we went. Yeah, I'm in Whitehorse now, and tomorrow my sister's coming up from the US just for 3 days to spend time with each other. So it's a 3 days holiday, and then I'm coming back. So yeah, the bike was excellent. So the difference between this bike and, say, the last bike was that it could hold a fatter tyre. So it's the fattest tyre possible. And that was quite a feat to be able to, it's an enormous thing. So the flotation was definitely beneficial in the soft stuff. So the main test was really that journey out to Shingle Point. That was most like the conditions I'm going to get in Antarctica. So the bike performed, and I performed actually better there than probably anywhere else, which is good. It's a different type of cycling. So the bike, yeah, it did a good job. The only thing with that big tire, it makes the bike big. So it's harder to get on it and off it, for example, because the tire's very high. So it makes the bike much higher. It's tall. It's a big bike. The rest of it worked well. There were no major breakdowns. Having that front wheel drive as well as the back makes a huge difference, especially in the soft stuff. So I'd be slipping and sliding all over the place and go down, and it takes a bit of power, but actually that was pulling me out sometimes when the back wheel had gone. And that's what it does. So you can actually feel that work. And it's very difficult, for those who haven't tried it to understand what the benefit is. It doesn't make me go faster, but it makes me stay on the bike for longer. And gives me a chance to move forward. All the other two bikes are also all-wheel drive of mine, so I'm used to that. No, it doesn't. You just ride it, but you can sort of feel how to ride it. So especially in the bumpy stuff, or if you really need extra traction, you sort of make sure you keep a little bit more balance maybe on the front, so you're leaning a little forward, so you've just got the weight on there. It works. Yeah, no, it's amazing, because if you were riding along and you had the all-wheel drive system switched on, there's virtually no difference. Even the guys at the shop here who'd never ridden it before, and they took a little ride, and they were just amazed, and they're really very good cyclists, and it is quite incredible. It still is a fraction harder. So if I didn't need the system, I was going along a nice bitumen road or gravel road, then I don't need it, then you should switch it off. But even on the ice, going on the ice roads, it was pretty tricky. But having the front wheel drive as well, again, if the back wheel slips, there's still more chance of grabbing something with the front wheel. So and in the end of the last ice road, I managed to install some studs on the front wheel. That was excellent, actually. I wish I'd done that before. I've never done it before, and I had these studs, and it would have been good to have that on the road on the way to Shingle Point, because I had some really bad fall, like dangerous falls. It's on ice, it's dangerous. On the snow, I can control the fall, but I did hurt myself a few times. I rolled the first time coming from Fort McPherson up to Arctic, and we had the second day. We didn't really know how long it was going to be, because it's the whole distance is only 80 kilometers as the crow flies, but the total distance, because it has to follow this channel which wriggles around, is like 160 kilometers. So and it's just winding through this sort of big channel, I should say, and there was sort of almost white out, so you couldn't really differentiate, and there was a blizzard coming in, so there were sand drifts, snow drifts across the road that I couldn't see how big they were, and I hit like that second day. I did 95 kilometers and hurt one ankle and both knees, and I was just going, oh God, and I was nervous. So if I'd had the studs on at that time, it would have helped quite a lot.
I've never used them before.
I did. There's certain things and materials work better than others, and I guess I'd gone in also having consulted other cyclists who've done things like the Iditarod, where they're cycling in cold conditions. Some of those guys, then they've been using, winter tight cycling gear and very cycling, specific gear. But I was freezing with that stuff, and I needed to have my polar gear over the top. So in the end, and my guide Bob said, you got to have loose clothing. So it was all contradictory. So my plan A went out the window, and so I just had sort of Polartec track bottom sort of thing underneath. So no padding, nothing, and that was okay. My legs were a bit cold, but it's a balance between being able to move. Yeah, and for me, there's a new base layer product that a company gave me called Merino Fusion. So it's half merino wool and half sort of a synthetic thing, but it kind of was really warm. It was actually quite a bit warmer. But the base layer, you want the warmth, and you want to be able to trap the warm air in and wick the moisture away. And same with the mid layers, but then obviously the outer layer, you need to be able to keep the wind chill off. So the last day in Tatak it wasn't that cold, but the wind chill would have made it down to about -30 probably. So you have to cover every bit of skin, and by doing that you're okay in keeping the wind off. But then if I only enclose my body in the capsule like that, then the moisture can't get out. So you got to have vents. So my outer shell, I had extra vents put in already because it's been such a problem. So I had extra big zips down my back. You still have the ones under the arms, and my legs. I had basically zips all down, so I can, half my thighs were unzipped essentially on the side, and that allows. So in that situation, I didn't perspire. That worked, but the mid layering. I think I know what I need now, but that's okay. I didn't. I was experimenting. I was experimenting with a soft shell, which is sort of quite warm, but it doesn't keep the wind out like the outer shell does. And the first day when I was working really hard in sort of soft snow, all I needed was the base layer essentially, and it was probably -17, 18 or whatever it was. And I was hot. I got hot. So the outer shell would have been too much. But for most of the rest of the time, as soon as the wind really gets up, you need to keep the wind off and keep the venting going. And it would have been better not. So I was wearing base layer, and then that soft shell, and then the outer shell. And maybe I need just more mid layers. But I didn't have any more of that merino fusion, and it seems to be when I was mixing the merino with the wool, the natural product with synthetic, which are still good supposedly, but the wool was much warmer, and I seemed to perspire much more when I mixed them, so it didn't work. So and the other thing I had on my base layers was the ones I was given by my main sponsor. Actually, they're just not long enough, so the arm, so I have kind of like thumb holes, but I can't wear this out there because I can't, my arms are too long, my shoulders too big. But the other ones I had made at the last minute with, I don't know, that much more length and with the wool, and they were really good. And I can get thicker versions of that, so I can make the right plans for what I think I need. And these conditions compared to Antarctica, having spoken with Eric Phillips, who's my guide, sort of the guide who's advising me on everything, who's an amazing polar explorer. And he said that the conditions up here will probably feel colder than they will in Antarctica pretty often, because there's 24 hours, sunlight in Antarctica, and keep the wind chill off, and it can feel pretty warm. It can feel pretty warm in the tent, whereas here it just gets to that damp cold, gets to the bones very quickly. And that's good because I've had to face stuff here, and having gone from that, I really suffered on the first, couple of weeks. In fact, having gone from +30s in Melbourne the whole time to suddenly I was taking off in -29 and certainly -20s all the time. I was cycling, and that's 50 degrees difference at least. 50 or 60, and my legs were swelling, my face was swelling, everything. And then by the time, yes, yeah, well, it's in the plan. So Victoria University has a cold chamber that I've sussed out, but would be a possibility. Otherwise, I can find some other industrial freezer probably somewhere in Melbourne. The altitude is the other issue which exacerbates everything. So I wasn't at altitude here, apart from one pass at sure, it was 1,200 meters. But in Antarctica, I'm going to be most of the time between 2,500 and 3,000 meters. So that's like 3,500 meters to 4,000 meters if it wasn't cold. If I do the altitude training in September and I'm going in November, basically that's a really good time because it hardens me up in terms of expedition. That where I'll be going would be fantastic. But then I can just keep that sort of moving along and keep a bit of work in the cold chamber. And it won't be cold, seriously cold straight away. It'll still be minus 15 maybe, but until I go high, and then it gets nastier. So yeah, so I've got all that in mind and a plan, and it's all about finding the funds right now, and this evolution of the clothing, the preparations, the food. One of the biggest problems I've had here is that I wasn't in control of the food, and while that the guides have put a lot of effort into the food, it wasn't quite right. I've lost masses of weight. I don't know how much I've lost, and part of it is that, for example, when we stopped at night, they used this specific tent called the Arctic oven tent, which is really warm because you have to go and chop the wood. So it's like an hour and a half to 2 hours before I can even get it, or even more before I get a meal. So for me, that's when it takes from my body, because for men, like for women, once you stop exercising, after half an hour, if you don't eat a decent amount of protein, it starts taking from the body. For men have about 2 hours, women have about half an hour. For Antarctica, I've got a dietitian and Eric Phillips and my own knowledge, and that'll be really well organised. So that will keep me warmer as well. Thanks, Gary. All right. Well, we'll be in touch after Easter, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay then. Bye bye.